My old work hat on. My old work hat on. Interesting. Interesting. La 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 la. Going to roll a blunt. Going to roll a blunt. Okay. Hey, let's watch some crazy shit at first, bro. Watch some crazy shit, dude.
2007, Naval Special Warfare Development Group's Blue Squadron raided the compound of a high-level Taliban commander in Helmand Province, Afghanistan. Going out on this mission, the team knew this compound was heavily guarded and they were in for a big gunfight. So they brought the whole crew with them, including the team's dog handler William Clark and his furry companion Axe. Clark and his dog Axe had been attached to Blue Squadron for quite some time at this point, but this was their first official big raid target, so the pressure was really on both of them to perform and prove themselves as valuable assets for Development Group. The team was dropped off just a few hundred meters away from the objective by an MH-47 Chinook helicopter courtesy of the Night Stalkers, and as soon as the ramp dropped, gunfire erupted on the team and the helicopter. The operators immediately dumped out of the Chinook and started returning fire on the enemies in the target house. And it didn't take them long to completely silence all the gunfire coming from the building. So the operators then stacked up near the front door of the building and sent Axe in first. The dog was equipped with an IR strobe on his back, so the team could track his every move through their night vision. They watched as the dog entered into the first room and immediately laid down, staring at some rugs. The dog being completely still was his way of telling his teammates that he detected danger. So Clark and the team quickly entered the room and unrolled the rugs, where they found two fully loaded PKM rifles hidden within the rugs. But aside from that, the first building was clear. Then suddenly, the drone providing overwatch for the SEAL team spotted a massive force of enemy soldiers pouring out from the village and surrounding the compound. The team needed to quickly clear the rest of the compound if they were going to be able to kill the target and safely exfil without being overrun. As the team approached the next house in the compound, they conveniently found a small locked doggy door. So they broke open the lock with bolt cutters and sent Axe inside. The operators then stacked up outside the front door and waited silently to hear any ruckus that might be going on inside the building. If they heard absolutely nothing coming from inside the building, it was pretty safe to assume that the whole building was completely clear of any armed hostiles. But on the flip side, if they heard grown men screaming and begging for mercy, it was time for them to make entry.
Right?
And it didn't take long before they heard those infamous screams. Axe had stumbled upon 2 men armed with AK-47.
God damn, that dog didn't
The
give a
dog had
fuck.
been well trained to continuously bite enemy combatants over and over and over again to keep them from being able to shoot at him. So when he came face to face with 2 armed men, he just bounced back and forth between them, biting them both over and over and over
This
again.
dog said, "One for
until
you
the
and one for you,
operators
bitch."
made their way into the room and dropped both men. As the team stacked up on the next door in the house, Clark quickly grabbed Axe's harness, not letting him go in first. He had a weird feeling about this room and thought the team needed to clear it themselves instead of sending the dog in. It ended up being a fantastic call because the room was absolutely packed full of women and children. And in the chaos and total darkness within the house, the dog would have likely
Edited
accidentally
everything.
bitten one of the civilians.
Yep.
But thankfully, Clark listened to his gut, and no civilians were harmed during the raid. As the team continued to move through the compound and search for the high-valued target, Axe suddenly jumped over a 3-foot wall and began attacking an armed man who was hiding under a blanket. One of the operators quickly leaned over the wall and shot the man once in the head, and then the team continued moving on through the compound. The first compound was now completely cleared with no sign of the main target. The drone overhead reported that the team still had a few minutes until the hostiles from the nearby village reached their position, so they decided to make entry on the compound next door. But as they were crossing a field on their way to the next compound, Clark noticed a man standing behind a tree and sent Axe to go investigate. Axe quickly latched onto the man's arm, and the man attempted to run into the nearby compound with the dog still attached to
Good
it.
luck,
But the
bud.
man's screams alerted the rest of the compound to the SEAL team's position, and suddenly PKM fire erupted from the building. Clark and the team immediately dropped to the ground, searching for cover in the open field. Bullets were now flying from all directions, and Axe was stuck in the center of it all. Clark could tell that Axe had been hit. He screamed his name at the top of his lungs, and through the chaos, he could see Axe trying desperately to make his way back to the team, but only stumbling and falling down over and over again. So Clark's teammates started laying down cover fire, and Clark got to his feet and took off running through the open field under gunfire to save Axe. Miraculously, he was able to reach Axe without being hit, and he quickly picked him up and ran about 100 yards back behind a small stone wall the team had already cleared.
It's crazy what dudes will do for man's best friend, bro. Like, Jesus.
The team's medic immediately met Clark and Axe behind the stone wall to provide medical aid. As the 2 operators frantically searched through the dog's fur, trying to figure out where he had been hit, they finally noticed steam coming off of his head. Clark touched the top of Axe's skull. He felt bone fragments, exposed skin, and blood. Clark radioed the rest of the team to let them know that Axe had been hit and was down for the night. Completely unfazed by the pain, Axe kept trying to pull away from Clark to get back in the fight.
Yeah.
The medic quickly gave Axe a shot of morphine to sedate him, and the operators all dug in tight and defended their position until the evacuation helicopter arrived.
Huh, that dude
to
stood
take
up real
them
quick.
home. At the end of the night, the team
Got
had
swept under the
killed
rug.
15 enemy combatants, and 8 of those 15 were accredited to Clark and Axe. Members
Damn.
of Blue Squadron had openly stated that if it weren't for the actions of Clark and Axe that night, the outcome would have been vastly different. Despite Clark not being a Navy SEAL, but instead a Master-at-Arms Special Operations dog handler, Clark displayed the utmost devotion to his teammates, his working dog, Axe, the mission, and the United States Navy. During the hour-long medical flight to Kandahar, Clark began processing the situation his partner, Axe, was in. At the Forward Support Hospital, Axe was wheeled into the trauma bay, Almost 3 hours had passed since his critical head injury at this point. The veterinarian at the hospital comes in and shockingly looks at Axe and just tells Clark flat out, "I don't know if I can treat this. I've never seen anything like this before." And that was the first time in Clark's career he had nearly lost his composure. The veterinarian told Clark, "I can tell you Axe isn't going to survive much longer. His breathing is too rapid. Soon his organs will shut down and he won't be able to keep up with the pace." Clark knew Axe had just saved their SEAL team. He knew he had to do whatever he could to return the favor for Axe. So Clark ran back to the secluded SEAL compound on Kandahar Airfield and grabbed other Special Forces medics and Air Force pararescuemen. Clark and the medics then quickly ran back to the hospital and started doing everything they could to save Axe's life. One of the medics grabbed a long-acting bronchodilator and mixed it with oxygen and then applied the mask to Axe's face. Within a minute, Axe's breathing was normalized. The next day, Axe was back to his normal, playful self. However, the injury caused him to lose vision in his left eye. In turn, he was deemed non-operational and sent stateside to recover in retirement. Axe would go on to be awarded the Bronze Star with Valor in addition to the Purple Heart for his heroic actions the night of December 4th, 2007. He was medically retired shortly after and spent the next 7 years of his life living a relaxing, joyous life with a veterinarian technician before passing away from bone cancer in 2014. Clark would continue serving in DevGru for the remaining years of his operational career, completing his last deployment in 2015. Thank you guys so much for watching this video.
Damn, dude, that dog was a straight up fucking gangster, bro. That dog was fucking gangster, dog. Holy shit. Like, that was fire.
Back with a released podcast that was immediately disavowed by nearly everyone in it, who said, "Oh, we think there might have been insider trading involved."
The podcast was not supposed to go live. They f***ed it up every step of the way. They leaked the podcast, and then they f***ing posted it when it was supposed to be canceled. They f***ed up twice, and the third was the launch itself.
Accusations flying. The episode got deleted, but it's still out there in the ether now with everyone nitpicking it apart. It's kind of a complete disaster for the Hawk Tuah team. And I found even more kind of wrong with it. I want to go through it because, yes, we do get mentioned in it, sort of as the boogeyman of crypto. We're going to get you. If you rug a coin, you know, we might come after you.
CoffeeZilla got on there. That scary guy, let me tell you. Don't ever want to have a conversation with him.
Whoa. Don't ever want to have a conversation with me. Guys, I'm not intimidating. I don't know what's the problem here. I'm Joe Rogan inches tall, guys. It's not a striking figure here you're going to be scared of. If you meet me in person, you're not going to be like, you know? Relax. It's fine. Just get on the call. Let's have a conversation. I don't understand. And I also thought this was weird because Haley Welch's lawyer invited me on the show. In fact, like, really, really wanted me on their show and kept telling me how much Haley Welch liked me. Hence the t-shirt, you know. I used to like CoffeeZilla until he wouldn't come on my podcast. Then he is, you know, Voldemort, and we can't mention him. He's scary. Watch out. Don't talk about CoffeeZilla. He's intimidating. Here's the message I got from her lawyer. Haley would like to have you on as a guest on her podcast. You'd be the first guest since the failed crypto token launch and would get significant amount of views. Would be very friendly. This guy must not know me. She really likes you. Wow. I thought she didn't want to have a conversation with me. What gives? You know, what happened in only a few weeks? You know, I turned into, you know, the most scary man in the world.
Yeah, right.
Now, I denied it. I said, look, I'm not a fan of what you did with Hawk. I have so many questions. You know, I need details. And then this guy says, I understand your position.
I have questions.
I think the more details come to light.
I got to do my insulin because I have diabetes.
Diabetes. Do you have mesothelioma? Diabetes. Fucking bad. Mesothelioma.
understand she was a victim in this. She does care about her fans and others that have lost money tremendously and is cooperating with all authorities as well as Berwick Law Group. This has all been very traumatic for her. And basically come on the show, please. You are the podcast's top priority for the first episode in 2025, guys. Me, the boogeyman, I was honored, to be honest. I was like, wow, I could be on the Talk To a show. But, of course, I don't want to rehab someone's image who scammed people. And I really felt that questions had not been answered that should have been answered, such as, what was the agreement with Haley Welch and with Doc Hollywood? Very simple question, right? Basically, Haley Welch's position is, oh, I was a victim. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know how much, I was barely going to make money, 125K plus like, you know, half of 10% of the tokens, locked for a year, like this terrible deal. I got taken advantage of by these monsters. Like that was kind of their position. And all I wanted to know was, you know, give me the contract. Show me that that is true. And unfortunately, they were not able to give it. He's not in a position to share it, he says. I'm sorry. I said, can't verify anything you say then. Even what you told me about the 50% split, which I had heard Hawk to a Girl was going to make 50% of all the profits. And he kind of told me, no, that just applies to the tokens. So I was like, oh, well, maybe she's less of a stakeholder in this than I thought. I don't know. I even pinned a comment on it, which we'll talk about. I said, no idea if that's real. He says, come tape the podcast and I'll let you read it. I thought this was really skeevy. I thought that's weird. And not even like let me post it, but just read it. That's super weird. And in general, I find that in these situations, going on people's podcasts where I've reported on them, they are highly likely to do sketchy editing, to try to kind of control the situation so they look as good as possible, obviously. But I'm just not I don't think that ever makes sense, like for me reporting on a scam to then like go on their podcast. It doesn't work. So I say no. No thank you. I appreciate it. Well, they bring FaZe Banks on because FaZe Banks is like the closest thing to doing what I did as well on the live stream. He also confronted Doc Hollywood, and so he was sort of one of the people that broke the news. So I thought, okay, that's a pretty natural guy to bring on your podcast. Now, FaZe Banks reached out to me and said, hey, I'm probably going to do this podcast. Do you have any questions that you'd like to get answers to? I said, yes, I do. I'd really like to see that contract. Now, spoiler alert, FaZe Banks didn't get to see it either. They didn't get to show it. But he also told me, look, we're going to tell everyone, do not talk about this show. It doesn't work if you talk about it because people are going to front run the coin. That's sort of how you guys got into this mess. This would be a disaster if you do that. So our only stipulation, these guys are very positive about crypto, much more like they kind of wanted to like rehab her image basically in the crypto space. So it's like a dream get for Haley Welch. Like this is amazing for her. And because FaZe Banks is basically going to like make it be like, oh, well, you didn't really mean to do that, right? But, you know, he's going to ask some questions, whatever. Well, turns out that didn't go so well because when this podcast went live, I thought maybe things went well. Turns out it didn't because Banks released this. He said, I agreed to do our first podcast back. I had heavy stipulations of not letting the market get manipulated. I think that's basic. Her team finding a real solution regarding the money she made. Those were non-starters. These people leaked or insider traded the token. We noticed a random spike in volume on the coin the day we did the podcast, along with random messages asking if we did the podcast. So are you guys getting this? Somebody front ran the podcast to buy up all the coins because they knew, ooh, everyone's going to like it when they release this podcast. Let's front run the coin, which is just horrible. It's like, what, do you want to re-victimize people? So they call off the pod. They're like, look, even the people most charitable towards Hawk Tuah say, we're out. We're done. But today, the episode got leaked. Apparently, there was an agreement. The podcast is never going out, but today it got leaked. I say that because some of the accompanying clips that got clipped seem to be good for Haley Welch. Like where she cries, about the rug pull, and people were saying maybe they kind of felt bad for her, right from this leaked show. Here's Dexerto saying Haley Welch broke down in tears while talking about the alleged rug pull of her.
I want to start by saying thank you to all my true fans and all the people that actually watch my stuff and they keep up with me. We're trying to sort out all the pieces and stuff to get all this figured out and make everything right. Oh my god, I'm gonna cry.
Should have never done it.
Don't cry. Don't cry. Everything's gonna be good. We're gonna.
That's a fake cry, dude. Look at that shit.
No, you're not. FaZe Banks canceled the episode. Are you guys getting that? He was like, I can't be a part of this, and they posted the clip. I can't believe it. That's unbelievable. Do y'all understand how insane that is?
How this idea got brought to me, it was supposed to be like a, what do they call it, a long-term thing. And the guy that ran the account, he was like, oh, we're going to change the way everybody thinks of crypto. Crypto's going to be a good place. And I feel really bad for all the people that got affected by it, and it just didn't go the way I planned.
That's right, guys. Haley Welch is very sorry. She wants you to know she did not intend it to go that way. And that podcast clip, yes, it wasn't supposed to go, but it just leaked. We don't know how. I approached, of course, the guys behind it, and they said it was an editor mistake. Oh, oops. Yes, the guys who interviewed us thought we may have insider traded the coin, but this guy vouches for the internal team, saying it was none of them. And Better, which is Jake Paul's team, I guess, no way they would ever do something like that, guys. Believe us, we will likely never know the info leak. The clip posting leak today was an accidental by Better's editor, who had the episode in the YouTube queue waiting on approvals to release. Now, I don't know if this is true or false. I thought the weird thing about this video is that, everyone has had, anyone in media who's, had a sensitive episode recorded, you don't, do all the work if you think it might get canned. Obviously, right? These people not only edited the show, they put an ad in the leaked version of the episode, okay? So I'm not saying it didn't leak. I'm saying it's highly convenient.
This started. Game Time believes in me, y'all, and I believe in them.
Game Time's more loyal than most of y'all's mans out here.
Yeah, some of those guys just leave at the first opportunity they get. Not Game Time.
Not Game Time, guys. Game Time wouldn't leak an episode on you. So that's just the start of this atrocious episode. But now that it's out, I did take a look at it, and it made me think twice about something that I've been trying to get to the bottom of for a while, which is that contract. The contract I keep asking about. Who was supposed to make the money, right? That's always the question in a case like this. That's what the boogeyman wants to know. I got to know who to scare. I got to know whose bed to get under to scare them at night. And I've been repeatedly asking this, and as I've said, basically their position is that she was just the small fry. She was the dupe. She was the person who got tricked into promoting this thing, right? This scam. But there was a certain thing she said that confused me, because I've heard two things. I've heard Haley Welch is getting half of everything, which is she's not the mark. She's one of the main players. Or two, she's basically getting $125K and nothing else. Well, I heard this during the show, and it made me think, interesting.
Half the money, it was supposed to go into my charity. That's really why I agreed to do it.
Did you hear that?
Half the money.
Half the money. Now, that's very interesting. That's very different from what we've been told, which is it's just $125K. I don't know if the part about the charity is true, that it was all supposed to go to charity. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not. Again, that's why I keep asking about the contract. Now, I went to their lawyer, and I was like, look, I don't understand the secrecy with the contract. You could settle this so easily. This guy says, I'm on a phone call. Then he says something he's been saying the whole time. As I've said, the 50% of net proceeds, that's apparently what she's talking about, half the money, was from the mutually agreed upon allocation of tokens. 10% locked for 1 year with a 3-year vest thereafter. Memetic, which is Doc Hollywood, was to get the other 50% of the 10%. So not 50%, only 5%, 1 year locked up. That's a terrible deal if you guys don't know that. And then he says her intention was to give her side to charity. We never got far enough down the road to make those questions. With regard to not sharing the contract, we can't, blah, 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 blah. We're in a legal situation. Now, This is where I finally had to play some of the cards that I had kept close to the chest up till now. See, I've been talking behind the scenes. I've been doing my little digging, right? And I got a very interesting insider document that a lot of people don't know about. This is from Doc Hollywood himself, which, if you remember, is like the key guy. Here he is saying, we'll do best to make it as simple as possible. The pre-sale raise is 50-50 Project Haley. Fees for market making and LP is split between us and Haley 50-50. Now that's a very, very different story than I've been told up until this point. It wasn't 50-50 pre-sale. Like, that's millions of dollars pre-sale. The fees were millions of dollars, okay? Or like $1 million. And that's what I say. The story's very different. This guy says, I think you can safely distrust anything coming from Doc Hollywood's mouth. He's denying it. He's saying, that's not true. And then he says, look, I just can't have the contract published online, willing to let you see it with your own eyes, and saying that's why he was going to let me see it on the podcast. I said, well, these messages were prior to the failure of Hawk Tuacoin. So I don't understand why would Doc lie. Like, this isn't him saying it to cover himself later. It's him, like, talking in a chat with other insiders back then. So, once again, Christian denies it. He goes, he's not right. I said, I don't understand your position. You want me to not trust internal messages from before the launch and trust you who refuses to produce evidence? This guy says, look, I can tell you what I think, but I don't have any way of proving it. I then say, you said on the podcast you negotiated the contract personally.
I negotiated the contract with the company.
I don't get why Haley would benefit from such a bad contract if what you said is true. And this is really how I feel. Half of 10% of tokens plus 125K makes 0 sense for someone who's bringing in all of the name recognition. Like, you're bringing the whole thing and you're getting this, like, measly piece of the pie? It doesn't check out. Like, 125K is a lot of money, but they made like $4 million. So then he says this, the contract says she was paid 125K on signing, 200K within 30 days of launch. Interesting. We didn't know that. And 50% of the net proceeds of the project with mutually agreed upon tokenomics. The tokenomics we agreed to were for half of the 10% of the tokens. Now, I want you guys to realize that what he just said is backtracking on what he's been saying the entire time, which he's been saying the entire time, oh, it's just 50% of the 10%. 50% of the tiny amount of tokenomics we're going to get. No. What he's saying here, finally, he's giving us the real story. It's 50% of the net proceeds of the project, period. That is completely different from what they've told me. And so I say 50% of the net proceeds does not mean half of 10%. It means 50% of net proceeds, which is market making, pre-sale. This is like $4 million that they talked about. And I don't know if he's just trying to play dumb here, but he goes,
Trying to
"We
cover
were
his
told by
ass on
Momentic."
what? You gotta cover them cheeks, dog.
The MMM fees and pre-sale funds were going to be used to run the project. Guys, it was $4 million. You think it takes $4 million to run a meme coin?
Right.
Or like 3.9 million? Sorry, it's like 3.9, I think. How are you getting the 50% only applies to 10% of the tokens? I'm baffled. You think they need $3 million to run a meme coin? 3 plus. 3.9 roughly. The dev team, by their own admission, said they had 4 guys. 4 guys do not need to split $4 million 4 ways,
Yep.
right? And so then they just kind of start doing this weird dance, and it got me like realizing, like, yeah, they're just trying to get out of it. Like, if you think for a second they would have said, oh, we only want the 10% if this project succeeded, you're mistaken. They would have asked for the millions of dollars. Now they're saying it because that money's getting them in trouble, right? There's a lawsuit about that money. So they're saying, oh, we weren't entitled to that. No, that's not us. Christian Baker said, we didn't even know the amount of money raised from the pre-sale until launch. I say, yes, but you're entitled to that per the literal contract. Also, we were told Meteora was on a de-escalation schedule from 15% down to 1%, and that would happen one after launch. Obviously, that didn't happen. And he said, my understanding is that a large tranche of the pre-sale money was put in the LP. We didn't have the access to the dev. We don't know what wallets. We were also told pre-sale tokens would be on a 1-month lock. 1 year vest. That didn't happen either. And once again, this is where I have to play some of my cards. Because like I said, I've been investigating this. I'm being told, oh, we weren't going to make any money. And I'm just trying to say, like, you guys aren't the victims. I hope you guys are understanding that this is kind of my feeling in all this. They're trying to be like, oh, we barely made a dime. And that's just not true. Like, that's not what they stood to make. I said, what do you mean? You told me I could disregard what Doc said. Remember, he said, oh, you can disregard it. But y'all literally had a contract for 50% of net proceeds. Doc himself said the project was going to cost a few $100,000. If that's the case, pre-sale $2.8 million, fees $1 million, made almost $4 million. Y'all are contractually owed like $1.6 million. And then I shared another insider text I have from Doc Hollywood, where he says, what we can do is put a hard number to the side for the project as cost. Like, we spent a few $100,000 on the project already. That money will be paid back to us off top. Then the profit is paid out. If a few $100,000 is what it costs and the profit's paid out, who's the profit entitled to? Hawk Tuah Girl! That's who it is. And we're all being gaslit about, like, oh, I'm the victim. I stood to make no money. You wanted to make no money after you realized the money is, like, being scrutinized and being sued over and possibly being looked into by law enforcement. Like, we don't know. So this literally drives me crazy. And then he goes, where is this from, if you don't mind me asking? I say, well, it's an insider chat, allegedly between Doc and the team members. And then he says, you're right that as it stands, she may be entitled to whatever amounts. However, she was supposed to have mutual approval on tokenomics. Her not being given the opportunity to approve the transaction fees, SAFs, and pre-sale identities led to the end result. So literally, he's admitting that he's been not telling the truth about how much money they stood to make. You're right, she may be entitled to millions of dollars from a scam? Like, what? I can't believe they said this.
Right.
It's insane. So that was a huge revelation. We finally got that out of them. They've been saying this whole time. They even said
a lot of times, man, if you give somebody a shovel, they dig their own grave, dog. It's fucking insane.
During the pod, this guy kind of did this whole thing of like the back end. Oh, the back end, it's only like 50% of 10% locked up for a year. And when the managers take their cut, it's like this.
Back end, there was a 10% allocation of the token.
See, I don't understand. In that phone call when CoffeeZilla confronted this chick, right? Wasn't FaZe a part of that phone call too, saying the same exact shit Coffee was? But yet Coffee's scary, and the guy who's like 2 times the size of Coffee's height is not scary?
And that would be on a 1-year lock, and then a 3-year drip after that. Of that 10%, half of that was supposed to go to the company that created the project, and half was to go to her. So out of 100% of the token, she would have had 5% at the end. Obviously, she has lawyer, manager, business manager, so even that 5% would have been cut down by over a quarter.
I just found this unbelievable. They're playing the victim. And that's kind of my problem with this whole thing. Look, I can believe a lot of plausible stories here. Now, I really don't believe anything they tell me at this point, but I could be convinced that this might be the case. Maybe it's the case that Hawk Tuah's team was under the impression that all these pre-sale investors were locked up for a month, right? That's what they told me. Again, I don't believe them necessarily, but it's plausible, right? I asked him, when did you learn that the insiders had 0 lockups? He says, when they started dumping. I was told all along the SAFs had a 1-month lock, 1-year linear vest thereafter. I can tell you what I think happened, but I don't have any way of proving it without seeing the SAFs. I have the SAFs, so I can tell you what happened. The pitch deck did say it was a 1-month lockup, okay? And then you get the SAFs, the actual token agreements with like the real investors. No lockup. That's how it all kind of went down, fellas. They lied and they deceived people with fake investment lockups. Like, they gave a pitch deck that was not really what the pitch deck ultimately turned out to be. Whether that was a last minute change, whether there's some great way to explain it, I don't think there is.
I love this fucking shirt, man. How much is this shit? I want to buy one of these.
But look, you can believe that, right? But Haley Welch's team this whole time has been acting like so unbelievably dishonest in how they're framing all this to try to make her look like as sympathetic as possible instead of admitting, like, actually, we did have some complicity in this. Maybe we should have asked more questions. We did stand to make way more money than we've let on in a lot of these interviews and with journalists, and we haven't been exactly forthcoming about that. So it makes it hard to be charitable, which kind of they're wanting you to be if we can't see these contracts, if we don't know what they knew, right, at the time when all this stuff happened. And it clearly was a scam because the pitch deck said one thing, they said it was a lockup, the SAFs said it wasn't a lockup. But it's hard to be charitable, right, when this is kind of the way they're interfacing, even with the FaZe Banks crew, who wanted to be charitable to her pretty explicitly. Like, they were like, look, even when they talked about me, they're like, hey, it's not going to be that bad. We're not going to be like CoffeeZilla.
Yeah, scary guy, let me tell you. Don't ever want to have a conversation with him.
We're a little bit more charitable than Coffee. I think Coffee.
But like I said, in that phone call, he was saying the same shit as CoffeeZilla here. Like, he agreed with him 100%. And this guy, let's be honest, he looks... He would be more intimidating to see than CoffeeZilla. CoffeeZilla comes up to my shoulders. This guy, I'd probably at least be about the same height as, you know? Like,
He kind of has a little bit of disdain for crypto in general. Us, on the other hand, we live and breathe it every day. We want to see crypto succeed.
Even those guys who admit that they have like a bias towards being charitable, right?
but you see this dog? It's called a brown nose, son. That's what these motherfuckers are doing.
Maybe I have a bias for being scary. But even they don't want anything to do with her team because her team is leaking stuff, messing up, like all this stuff with supposed insider trading. Again, their team denies it. I got to be clear about that. But clearly somebody was trading on the information, which they shouldn't have, and then leaking the episode as an accident. So, yeah, I just wanted to cover this story, just explain how bad faith they've sort of been throughout this, some of the revelations we've learned since then, and also admit there's plenty we don't know that I hope will be revealed in this lawsuit, which is happening about this coin, fighting for this money, that clearly Haley Welch's team is like, oh, we don't want that anymore. We just want to, you know, we want to say we're not entitled to any of that. And so I do hope in that lawsuit things actually come out and victims get their money back. But yeah, I just wanted to cover this story now that the Hawk truth is floating around on the interwebs. I wanted people to get a more
Holy fuck.
clear, holistic picture of what actually happened, both on the screen and behind the scenes. Okay, see ya.
That was interesting. I don't know, bro. There's so many damn scams out there with the crypto shit and all that other stuff, bro. It's kind of amazing anybody really still trusts a lot of the meme coins that come out.
Trailer for World of Horror looks like. A schoolgirl enters the bathroom with a small kitchen knife as she carefully looks around for the thing that's been following her. Without knowing it, that thing was already there.
Suffer for me. What the fuck? Yo. That was dark. Holy fuck.
This segment alone had me on the edge of my seat because of three main reasons. One, a horror game made with Junji Ito style is a dream come true. 2, a horror game that combines Lovecraftian cosmic element with Junji Ito style just sounds amazing. And finally, 3, a horror game that has detective mystery elements allowing you to solve the problem is one of my favorite genres. But unfortunately, only 2 of these conditions were met. World of Horror is this little roguelike that began as a smash indie hit being developed by one guy, officially releasing in 2023 before dramatically disappearing. While it's not rare for games to be forgotten after being hyped up, it is rare for a game like this to be discarded from the internet so easily. And I believe I know why. To show you the problem, let me start by showing you what the game actually is. You start the game by picking one of 3 modes, with the game recommending you experience the spine-chilling story of School Scissors. I promise it's way cooler than something is happening to your town. An old train station slows down and stops at its last station. The end of the world is at hand, and you finally arrived in the doomed town. From here, the game drops you into the backdrop of the town with the lighthouse gleaming in the distance. At first, you might go to your apartment and check out what's going on there. Or you can be overwhelmed like me with the UI. Like, what the heck are all these words? We first start our investigation on the School Scissors. A rumor has been spreading out of a terrible woman returning from the grave. A woman with the widest smile and the sharpest scissors. Here's the gist of it. Our friend thought he could banish the ghost by himself, and after not hearing from him for a long time, you went to school to finish the ritual that he started with his book. Again, the UI made it hard to understand what I was supposed to do here, but based on the clues from the text, we needed to uncover what our friend had written in his book. Let's see, in section 15 he said that one of the classrooms contains candles needed for the ritual. Section 18 said we can weaken the demon with the sigil drawn here, so we now have a destination and an objective. We exit out of the notebook and press on the Explore School button. Ooh, a tall woman with an unsettling face and twitching lips stops you. She asks us to help her move her stuff. Now, I'm sorry, they say to never judge a book by its cover, but I would probably be a bit hesitant if someone with a twitching lip stops me for anything. Then again, she said she is new here, so maybe she's just a bit nervous. But we have other things to do, like saving our friend, so I'm going to have to decline. Oh, we are forced to help her, but I want to point your eyes at this. Luck chest. This is the core mechanic behind World of Horror. On the side of your portraits are stats you can find on any typical tabletop RPG, and each of these stats will be used to roll on nearly every encounter in the game, especially the luck stat that is invisible to the player. That all happened back to back. We go back to exploring the campus and stumble across an old anatomy model. Its heart still beating. The sight almost makes you sick. -1 stamina. You found an additional page on your friend's diary saying that the blessed chalk was left on the roof. This time, we were given the choice to peek outside, but since we were in a hurry, I decided to explore the school once again. On the roof, you find the girl your friend was talking about. In one hand, she holds a bag. In the other, a pair of bloody scissors. The scene opened up to a girl named Maru with her mouth slit open in a wide grin. But what's even more terrifying is this mess below her. This is where we learn the World of Horror combat, the central mechanic of which is the action meter. These 4 buttons shows what type of action you want to use. These buttons are the action you will use, and the bar indicate how many action you can take in one turn. Meaning, you can beat the crap out of anyone if your stats are high enough. After defeating Maru, we grabbed the blessed chalk and returned to the classroom. Since I'm a bit of a smooth brain, it took me a bit to figure out that you can actually draw with the 1 and 2 button here, and even a bit more to match the symbol from the notebook. 1 down, 1 more to go. We went back to exploring the school to find the candles and stumble upon a black doll. Upon closer inspection, I really hope I can show this to YouTube. Finally, the candle for the ritual. We lit them accordingly, and now... Wait, what is that? You take a step back as the writhing amorphous mass slowly takes shape. Soon, it becomes a tall, woman-like creature with 3 faces, all connected by a wide smile. Now, it is your chance to defeat this horror. It is your only chance. This game was made in MS Paint, by the way. The art is quite good for what I can assume is a guy drawing with
Yeah,
a mouse.
Microsoft Paint.
Some of it
What?
gets pretty disturbing later on in the video. Some of you may recognize the urban legend behind this lady, the slit mouth woman, known for going around and asking people if she's pretty. If you say no, she will slash your face, giving you the same Glasgow smile. If you say yes, then she pulls her mask down, asking once again, am I pretty? If you answer either yes or no, she brutally kills you regardless. So the only way to truly escape her is to give her an uncertain answer and make a run for it. Unfortunately, you get neither of that choice here and actually just straight up fight her. This is a boss encounter and she does a good amount of damage to our meager health bar, but we should be strong enough thanks to the correct sigil drawn from earlier. The horror disappeared and our friend was found to be alive. Ending A. In my opinion, the tutorial actually does a decent job at explaining how to navigate their confusing button prompt and showing us what to expect. 1. You can beat any horrors in the game provided you have the strength to do so.
It's crazy. Did this
2.
all on Microsoft
Every
Paint?
mystery has its own multiple endings. And finally 3. The game is entirely RNG, which here is when the problem begins to rear its ugly head. RNG isn't entirely a bad thing. It's a mechanic that creates artificial content and can save the developers a lot of time and money. In fact, one of the main appeals to roguelike games is its inherent randomness and how each run is theoretically different from the rest. An example of random generation in other games is Minecraft, which is built entirely through an algorithm that randomly places landmarks for you to explore and build over. Now imagine if Minecraft world has to be built slowly, one block at a time. But RNG can also be used for bad things as well. Despite being a gacha gamer, the mechanic of pooling for a new character is akin to gambling. The RNG here serves as a dopamine rush when you finally manage to land on that golden unit you've wished for. There's also artificially making the game increasingly difficult by turning the game against you. Now, going back to World of Horror, the way the dev uses RNG can be a major turnoff for many players. To help you understand the RNG problem, let me show you the 3 most important stats in the game. These 2 are basically your health bar, and this is your time limit. If stamina and reason hit 0, it would typically be a game over, but the game lets you continue fighting on, giving you a chance to recover, even from the negative. However, there's nothing you could do for the Doom meter. To give you an example of how much RNG can screw you over, here is a run on Mimi, which automatically puts you in the 2nd hardest difficulty. Our first mystery is about investigating the disappearance of 3 teenagers who were filming a documentary. Right away on my first exploration of the mansion, I got hit with a plus 2% Doom, which isn't too bad because, oh, I just got hit with a -2 reason. Well, at least we complete our objective for this investigation. Time to explore the place the game actually wants us to go. You've been cursed with survivor skill, which adds 2% of Doom at the end of every mystery. You know what? This isn't too bad. It's still salvageable. I'm gonna get some new allies in the form of recruiting high school students to follow me indefinitely and getting myself a new flashlight. Now, normally finishing a mystery would subtract some Doom from the Doom meter, but since we are automatically on the 2nd hardest difficulty combined with survival skill, I already knew this run was doomed. What I'm trying to show you is the constant negative things that just happens, and while yes, you can deal with losing your HP, there is rarely anything in this game that can reduce the Doom meter. I cannot tell you how frustrating it is to literally lose on the last step towards the ending because now I have to pray on the metaphysical luck to somehow not encounter a Doom event. This is the RNG problem. How do you go about beating a run if the run is already over from the beginning? It's questions like that that causes many people to drop the game because some encounter can leave you with a temporary or even permanent injury that debuffs you the entire run. But since the majority of my current audience are probably gacha gamers, how would you deal with this problem? Unfortunately, there isn't any way to bypass the ungodly amount of bad luck you will suddenly be struck with. But if we know anything, then it's the fact that a chance higher than 0 is a chance we're willing to take. So yes, RNG can be a big problem in this game, but maybe it isn't so bad. Chance is inevitable in almost everything. But remember the statement I said way earlier in the intro? 3. A horror game that has detective mystery elements allowing you to solve the problem is one of my favorite genres. But unfortunately, only 2 of these conditions were met. Amidst the sea of problems that may turn people away, the one that strikes me the most is how this isn't a detective mystery game like I had hoped. Sure, some investigation have you actually using your noggin to solve the problem, but they are rare and few. Most investigation in World of Horror consists of you going to wherever the circle is at the moment, while also giving you a choice on whether to complete the bonus objective or ignore it. I wish I could tell you that you'd at least be able to explore the surrounding area or maybe figure out the mystery on your own, but you don't. Just like you've seen in the previous section of the video, this is all the game is. So maybe the gameplay isn't a catch, but the story. This is where some people might say that the game is a visual novel, which is a grossly misleading assumption. Just cause you have to read a lot that makes it a visual novel? I mean, would you call these visual novels then? Sure. The way the story is presented is in a visual novel format, but that doesn't mean that the whole game itself classifies as a visual novel. If you aren't familiar, visual novels are games that focus solely on text and illustration. At minimum, it is a reading experience first and gameplay later. World of Horror treats each investigation as its own story, so nothing from the first investigation will carry over narrative-wise. Why I think people label this game as a visual novel is that the game has these 2 elements and also a multiple ending type at the end of each investigation. But these people forgot that this game has an entire other RPG element that makes it an actual game. You can level up, then choose to allocate your stats, pick different items and weapons, and also choose different perks. And when you die, you have to start all over again, making this a true roguelite experience. But what about the horror part? The way a roguelite instills fear in you is about the same as a survival horror game. 1. The scarcity of resource creates this anxiety of the next upcoming thing, making you constantly worry whether you have enough health or damage to deal with the problem, which leads to the second part, which is the actual scare itself that comes along once the player is in a vulnerable spot. World of Horror achieves the first step with its extremely tight resource management and constant negative events, forcing you to use everything in your inventory. But where it struggles is the second step. When you first start World of Horror, you might be amazed at the amount of reference brought to life in this game, ranging from obscure Lovecraftian horror to well-known Junji Ito's creation. While these encounters are stressful, it isn't exactly frightening, but there are still some incredible moments, one of which actually made me recoil. Skip to this timestamp if you want to go into the game without being spoiled by any of the story. Eerie episode of Evolving Eels begin with your neighbor asking you to investigate a creepy tenant who's a little too obsessed with fish. The atmosphere itself is surprisingly lofty considering the looming eldritch horror threat. Like 2 friends playing Scooby-Doo, we investigate his apartment, his computer, and the school he works at. Soon, you and Kana stumble across a bunch of jarred eels-like fishes, to which Kana took one despite our protests. Have you ever seen eels like this? So freaky. Don't you have a feeling it's like watching this? After a bit of exploring and getting stalked, Kana informed us about the neighbor burning some notes behind the building. And literally, as I went to check the apartment, I got another curse. But Kana was right. Someone did try to burn some paper. We salvaged what we could and went back to decipher the note. The note reads something about a village that dumps bodies for eels to lay their eggs in. After reading the note, you turn to your neighbor who says, there must be something more we can learn. I'll try to break into his apartment tomorrow morning. I wonder what he's hiding in there. You shrug nonchalantly. If anyone's gonna commit a crime today, it's not gonna be you. Although, you just wish you could throw this damn jar into the trash. So now, we wait for Kana. You waited an entire day. Where the hell are they? You decided to check out the neighbor's apartment yourself, and As you enter the apartment, you're met with eels flailing around inside the jars as you're
Ew.
only left with 3 choices. Check the bathroom, the bedroom, or run. I decided to check the bathroom first. Maybe Kana's in there. But what we found was something else. The neighbor's swollen corpse, rotting away in the murky water. His eyes are missing. Luckily,
Ugh,
it
that's
wasn't
gross.
Kana, but I fear that they may have suffered the same fate. Kana,
That's just nasty.
they're alive, but there's something in their eye. We need to make a decision now. We should rush them to the hospital? If that something in Kana's eye is the same as our neighbor, then maybe we have to...
Ooh.
You rush Kana to the hospital. All you can do now is wait. Wake up, dude. You've been asleep for like 3 hours. You groggily open your eyes to see your friend Kana. They're wearing an eye patch. Not so pretty anymore, but couldn't exactly tell the doctor the truth about what happened, and pretty sure I won't be winking with my left eye anytime soon. But thank you for saving my life. Kana's the best, man. This is an example of one of the best mystery in the game, especially with how fast they were able to get me to care for this oddly chill guy slash girl. Honestly, I don't know if it's another bug or something, but Kana's gender is actually a mystery in itself. Regardless, eerie episode of Evolving Eels perfectly encapsulate that sense of anxiety and dread you'd find in a horror game, especially the build up to what would have became of your new friend. But what about the roguelike part of the genre? How can the game keep itself fresh despite you already knowing everything? Well, they do it with characters. By characters, I don't actually mean NPCs you can talk to, but characters you pick to play as. Most of these characters dramatically change up the way you have to play the game, and this can add a lot of replayability to World of Horror. Take Haru for instance. Besides looking and fighting like Kiryu from Yakuza, he starts with a debuff called nicotine addiction, causing him to be 1.2 times slower in combat, which can be remedied if you were to regularly buy cigarette packs and use them before combat, giving him a pretty decent buff. However, because of either a bug or something else I haven't noticed, he straight up inhales the cigar every time I buy one, forcing me to be permanently stuck with this debilitating debuff. Another one of my favorite is Mimi. Oh, Mimi. When picking Mimi, you are automatically placed in the second hardest difficulty, starting us off with only 13 stamina and 10 mind. Her stats look incredible and are actually really good for early game, until you realize you have to freaking lobotomize yourself every end of the mystery. The absolutely insane mental gymnastic you have to do to forcibly rewire your own vestibular system combined with the negative luck, which by the way adds onto the already increased bad luck that will happen, and you'll fail every event check. You know what Moriko Ishii gets? What I'm trying to say here is that there's genuinely a lot to do in this game despite the small story investigation you have to navigate, especially when, much like any roguelike, you slowly unlock more things over the course of your own playthrough. Meaning, new investigation, items, and even curses you'll have to deal with. Even now, I've yet to beat the game 100% and have probably only scratched the surface of what this game contains. Like, for instance, the game border represents that of an old CRT monitor you'd find in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
Upon zooming out all the way, you get to see that you're playing a game within a game. It is dark outside, pitch black in your own room. You notice black ooze dripping from the disc port as you click around the endless abyss, trying to reach for something. But nothing ever appears. At least, that's what I keep telling myself. Occasionally, weird symbols would appear as the game load. I sometimes feel as if someone is watching me from the windows, staring silently. After playing through most of these characters, I can slowly come to a conclusion that maybe I'm just making this all up. Maybe this is just a consequence of staying up way too late for the past few days as I continue to dive into this game. While I've been talking mostly about gameplay and design choices, I failed to mention that this game is nowhere finished yet, and the developer had gone radio silent since October of 2023. Sure, the game has its up and down, and I've only been talking about the major negatives while trying my best to not be nitpicky. But there are plenty of positives in World of Horror. For instance, the artwork is genuinely amazing, especially when you learn about the fact that this game was drawn by a dentist in his off time on MS Paint. Almost every injury and curses are represented on your character sprite. There's also a lot of reference from real world counterparts, which I will lead you to discover. So, why do I think that the game has faded away to the niche side of the internet? To be honest with you, I believe it's either due to the lack of communication from the developer himself, or simply because the internet has moved on. And I'm sure, or at least I hope, that the developer is happy with his game and where it has taken itself to. Thank you guys for watching. More content to come, so.
That sounds like a fire-ass game I gotta check out, dude. World of Horror. Interesting. That was a game we definitely gotta try to check out. World of Horror.
Winding Refn has made some memorable, sometimes divisive films in the past couple of decades. He wrote and directed Bronson with one of Tom Hardy's breakout performances as notorious and violent criminal Charles Bronson. He's partly responsible for, I don't know, at least several Ryan Gosling memes, probably, thanks to his thriller Drive.
I Drive.
And despite pushback from critics and director William Friedkin, he's remained proud of his action film Only God Forgives.
I have no regrets about Only God Forgives. I think it's a masterpiece, and it is expensive.
Is there a doctor in the house? We need to get a medic in here. If you think that's a masterpiece, what is Citizen Kane?
But before all this, Nicholas directed a trilogy of Danish crime films that I had never heard of called Pusher. And these films are gritty and dark and tense, and each film's conflict just seems to go from bad to worse to just god-awful, full-blown depression, crying on the floor in the fetal position, terrible. It's great. These are not films that glorify the crime world. They just present it for what it is. Yeah. And it's filled with an assortment of complex characters who more or less yearn to escape it. They're all just solid crime thrillers that, in my opinion, only got better as they went along, and I'd like to share them with you, as well as some of my thoughts. No spoilers, by the way, but I would also understand if you want to go into these blind. They're really a nice surprise. But first, I want to give a shout out to all of our loyal supporters on Patreon. Thank you guys so much for continuing to support this channel. And if anybody else would like to support it, just go to patreon.com/thebackfocus. Nicholas Winding Refn originally made Pusher as a short film that aired on Danish television. He was then approached by producers to help fund a feature, which he had already conceived of, and he was planning to shoot it on black and white 16mm film. When he was presented with a bigger budget, he chose to up the film stock, but he kept a lot of the minimalistic aspects. The on-location shooting, handheld cinematography, and overall gritty style and production of the film was kind of similar to films produced by filmmakers during the Dog Me 95 movement, and really makes it feel like you're watching a documentary. The film follows Frank, a low-level drug dealer, as he's wheeling and dealing heroin around Copenhagen.
Hvad siger du? Selino?
Jeg kan godt lide en gun. Vil du have en gun her? Der skal ikke være en gun her.
Må jeg få den igen?
He's pretty level-headed compared to his sidekick Tony, played by Mads Mikkelsen in his first feature film role. That's one thing that surprised me when watching this, is that I feel like we're all so used to seeing Mads as this composed, foreboding villain, you know, like the Bond villain, right? You know, he doesn't have to do or say too much to come across as threatening.
It's crazy, 10 years time.
sker der? Hvad sker der, mand?
In this role, he is a crude, gross, unpredictable, racist, misogynistic wild card who probably smells bad.
Men jeg skal lige have igen. Du har spærret med, du pissede en pige ud. Nej, jeg spærret med hende i hovedet, og så pissede jeg det rent bag. Hvad? Det gjorde det ikke. Det gjorde det. Du spærrede med hende, og så bad hun om at pisse dag med hende.
The film kicks into high gear when Frank borrows against his supplier Milo for a lucrative drug deal. From there, well, yeah, you know, if things went swimmingly, I guess we wouldn't have a movie now, would we?
Jeg får nogle gode hvide heroin om et par dage.
Det måste vara brunt. Jag måste ha det imorgon.
Det går simpelthen bare ikke.
Får 700 kronor grammet.
It all seems like a simple concept, but it is tense as hell. At the time, a film like this in Denmark was kind of revolutionary. Like, when you look it up, it's considered the first Danish crime film, which sounds crazy, but I guess it was. And even today, it still feels raw, real, and gave me plenty of anxiety as Frank tries to pull enough cash together to pay back Milo.
Men nu er jeg 180, ja. Nu er jeg 180, ja.
Hvorfor?
Det er for din historie, som du kommer fra. For den historie. Det er den her. Så den voksede det bare. Den, så det er 180 og 50, ja.
If I had to compare the story to anything more modern, I'd say it has the same feel as something like Uncut Gems. And the world building here is just fantastic. It just feels extremely dirty. Like a documentary capturing the brutality and ugliness of drugs on the street. Some of the shots are so poorly lit, you can barely tell what's going on. Every scene looks like it was lit with natural lighting.
Fuck, nu har jeg det godt. Du skal da holde på det ret der.
I love this one shot of them driving. Now, at first I thought, are they in the back seat of a cab or something? But they're in the front seat of a car. It's so close up to their faces, and I struggled to figure out where in the world the camera operator was sitting. Was he on their laps? Was he on his back, like on the console, and his head's on the dashboard? Like, was he a contortionist? Plus, there's like a bunch of scenes with these seedy criminals just kind of doing normal, dumb things. Like, for example, moving a fridge after negotiating a massive drug deal.
Skal de have båret køleskab ud, mand? Du lover det med et køleskab, ja. Hvad? Ja, det er nu, ja.
Jeg tager lige herop, så tager du det.
It's little moments like this that help add a whole extra layer of realism to the film. Also, I think because it felt like a documentary, the drug scenes were just that much more cringeworthy and awful to watch. Ugh, you're there. You're in the muck, and it doesn't let you out. I remember physically recoiling from the screen, watching them lick heroin off of a CD and a knife. God, stop it. All right, you got it all. I think... And the acting is a whole other thing. So apparently, they didn't do any rehearsals.
Fordi spillerne, de spiller bare sådan, som de nu fornemmer i øjeblikket. Fordi det giver tit tingene sådan en nerve, der ikke er der, hvis man har øvet det 25 gange, før man begynder at optage det. Så jeg må sige, jeg er blevet meget, jeg kunne virkelig godt lide den måde at arbejde på her.
As a result, Refn needed an experienced actor in the lead. So just 2 weeks before filming, Refn actually fired the original actor who was going to play Frank and got the more experienced Kim Bodnia to star. This helped tremendously because some of the minor roles in the film were done by more inexperienced actors and friends of Refn, and they were totally not prepared for Bodnia's intensity during some of these scenes. This led to some genuine, real reactions captured on film because they had grown accustomed to the previous actor's performance.
Jeg kan ikke stå og være ånden på mig, mand. Jeg står snart i telefon. Min kæreste har det bare så dårligt. Far. Gå væk, sagde jeg, mand! Gå væk! Jeg står snart i telefon, mand! Hvad laver du, mand? Åh, det er en skide junkie derovre, mand! Skide junkie!
And although it did exceedingly well financially, one of Nicholas's films, Fear X, in 2003, left him and the production studio 5.5 million crowns short. This debt was a large factor in driving Nicholas to revisit the Pusher universe with Pusher 2. which explores the world even further and just manages to do it in a way that doesn't cheapen or tarnish the legacy and popularity of the first film. In Pusher 2, the narrative switches completely to Mads Mikkelsen's character, Tony, who remains a complete and utter loser. The film opens with Tony in prison, looking to prove that he's not soft on the last day of his sentence. So he just quickly punches a guy in the courtyard and spends a considerable amount of time frantically running around, avoiding a pissed-off gang. This is our hero. He is an idiot who has little to no emotional maturity or capacity to deal with anything, really.
Hvad laver du egentlig herude? Bare se, hvordan det går sådan. Godt. Hvad laver du sådan noget? Så går jeg lige rundt og prøver at finde et job, så tænker jeg, du skal lige have chancen for at være den første, der får fat i mig.
He eventually starts working for his dad, who's a real piece of work on his own, by stealing cars and delivering them to his workshop. But he can't even do that right at first.
Hvad fanden tænker du på? Hvad? Få den bil ud. Og det er en vis fart. Slap nu af, gider du ikke? Tror du, Patrick skal finde den her? Jeg prøver sgu da bare på, man. Prøv bare. Hvordan er det der sådan en pikhoved, hva'? Man stiller sgu da ikke en Ferrari uden der er bestilling på den.
There's also a familiar face in here from the first film, Milo, Frank's high-level drug supplier.
Vi kører her, ikke? Hvad med pigerne? Ja?
Du ved, det kører altid.
Ja. Er du sikker?
The inciting incident is when Tony learns that he has a son.
Så tager de min bistand. Men det er egentlig meget godt, du stod op, fordi du har altså nogen, du skal tage dig af.
The rest of the film has this overall theme of fatherhood, right? Like on one hand, Tony wrestles with becoming a father and how incongruous being a parent is with his current lifestyle. On the other hand, he's got some real deep-seated issues with his own father.
Det vil sige, det er dig, kan man regne med. Det er noget andet end med min egen.
The whole thing is a sharp exploration of the classic sins of the father storyline, and how some people, they just inherit this generational trauma and are born into an awful situation. Some questions arise. How much of your horrible life can be attributed to your environment, and how much is your own doing? And perhaps more importantly, what can you do to break the cycle?
De der blomster eller bødler, de skal være ud af. Det er en fugl, mand. Er der en med en fugl på? Selv er en fugl. De skal ud af de der bødler. Hvad er det der? Det er fugle. Det er sgu da frøer, mand. Det der, det er en fugl. Det tager den her.
Similar to the first film, the plot continues to just up the ante with countless obstacles for our quote-unquote hero, and anxiety just keeps on coming, keeps on trucking, man. I've always been attracted to these extremely flawed protagonists, like Harvey Keitel in Bad Lieutenant, or Tim Heidecker in the comedy is great, actually. You know, you're just waiting to see some semblance of empathy or humanity from this person. Sometimes that redemption comes, sometimes it doesn't. And whether or not it finds Tony makes for a really engaging story and a spectacular performance from Mikkelsen. So, in keeping with the style of the first two Pusher films, I was eager to see which character would be the protagonist, right? They're switching it up every time, it seems. In a bizarre but welcome turn, Pusher 3 focuses on Milo, and how he balances his idyllic real life with the dirty business of drug dealing. And it turns out he's also dealing with issues of sobriety. That creates amazing tension throughout the film. Will he stay on or fall off the wagon?
Holder mig fra den første, så det skal nok gå. Men jeg håber, jeg ryger ikke ud i vandet dengang. Ja. Det er nu, og jeg bliver stoffri. Ja. Det er nu, det holder.
In doing this, Pusher 3 gives us another perspective of this world. Interestingly, Milo actor Zlatko Buric is the only actor to appear in all three Pusher films. He even reprised kind of a different version of Milo, but it's pretty much the same character in the poorly received 2012 UK remake.
Frank, you owe me 55,000.
In keeping with previous storylines, Milo has a slight issue with one of his suppliers, and all this chaos lands on the day he's promised to cook food for 50 people for his daughter's birthday.
Skal jeg lave nye regler?
Hvad vil du? Mere penge eller hvad?
Selvfølgelig mere penge, der mangler.
Okay, det kan vi godt snakke om, ja.
Ikke lige nu.
Hvorfor?
Fordi jeg er pisse travlt nu. Jeg skal lave med for 50 mennesker. Jeg skal have fest i dag, og jeg skal klippe.
Hvornår så?
We follow him as he's maddeningly spinning multiple plates. The birthday, the NA meetings, the suppliers, the complications with them. It's a good little roller coaster ride.
Hvad stress, Milo? Slap af. Ikke så godt som en gammel mand som dig bliver stresset. Det er farligt. Skal i byen, ja?
Selvfølgelig. Hvornår får du en gøst det?
Kan du ikke lide den, eller?
Again, an unexpected character, and one that I never would have guessed to be the focus of a full-feature film. And yet, it found a way to realistically depict his humanity and the situations he deals with. And I was just completely invested in what was going to happen next.
Jeg tror, du skal ikke have noget kokain.
Nej.
Men noget heroin. Jo.
Nej.
Du siger nej, men du mener ja.
Nej.
Hyg du dig med det, ikke? Pas på dig selv og sådan noget, ikke?
Ja, lige måde.
This might be the most gruesome of the three films. Again, I won't give too much away, but, things get pretty extreme. Milo is definitely the most cutthroat of the three protagonists. Maybe he's just been soaked for too long in this dirty world, and the film puts him in a particular moment that really tests his moral fiber and asks the question, how low is he willing to go? Is there any humanity left in this guy? Will he ever escape this life? And maybe as a follow-up to that, does he want to? Overall, the Pusher trilogy paints a dark picture of the criminal underbelly of Denmark, yet somehow does it with an objective lens, right? It never tells you what to think or how to feel. The handheld style really makes it feel like a documentary. It's just presenting these characters for better or worse. One thought continued to float around in my head while I was watching it. The only thing worse than having your life ruined or putting yourself in a horrible situation is knowing that you're the one that put yourself there. It's a special, white-hot variety of hell. It also makes for a great story.
That just sounded cool as fuck. Alrighty guys, I should probably be getting off here. Start getting ready. Tell you. Alrighty guys, I gotta get off. I got work I gotta go do. Shit. Gotta go handle my life. Fuck. Alright.